Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Lead Ministry Live and the Lead Volunteers podcast. Grateful that you guys are here. I am excited about today's interview. It's going to be something that all of us kind of need, and we don't know that we need it until after the transition has happened. Well, I want to just share with you, my name is Josh Denhart, and this again is something that I do because I like it, because it's fun to talk with leaders across the country. It's fun to help leaders across the country, and it's super exciting for me to hear feedback that people are actually really enjoying the podcast. So I'm grateful for that. Want to just say our guest today is none other than Catherine. How are you, young lady?
Hello. Hi, everybody. Oh my goodness. You're so good at this, Josh. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, tell everybody who you are and kind of what you're doing right now. We'll get to what you used to be doing and now what you're doing, all that stuff. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Catherine. I have the honor of being able to be the children's pastor here in sunny SoCal
Yes.
at a church called Mariners Church. We moved here now. I'm on my 6th month, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. And so tell us about your church experience before this church.
Yeah, I was at an incredible church called Bayside. I was there about 5 years, which
Mm-hmm.
was in Northern California. And then before that, um, I was also in Northern California, so we were there 7 years.
Uh-huh.
But we actually originally came from Southern California. We were more in the LA area, but we are happy to be back. So grateful,
So you've
especially.
moved home.
We did. We moved kind of home. I mean, OC and LA are very different, so
Yes.
it's still a whole different culture. But yeah, in some sense, like the weather, the people, the
Yeah.
restaurants, it
Well,
is
you're already making all of us covet your space. So
definitely.
no, but I'm grateful. It's been fun to be a friend with you over the years and to see a lot of fun things happening. So, who knows where our discussion is going to go today, but what I did want to talk about is when you were at a church for 5 years, you said?
Hmm.
So you were there for 5 years, and then, it was from your successes at that
Yeah.
church and what God was allowing to happen through you and with your leadership that another church said, "Hey, why not?"
Yeah.
So that's exciting, but a lot of people don't understand that when you've been at a church for 5 years, you have amassed a lot of goodwill with people. You
Yeah.
have amassed a lot of credibility. So talk about what you had there. Like what types, just explain that. Everybody knows it, but unless you've left a place, you don't know what you left behind.
Yeah, and especially for me in that specific role, I grew into the children's pastor role. And so that that's another thing too, is the benefit of kind of growing with the church. So I
Yes.
was first the K-3 director, and then from there a year into it, they're like, "Hey, can you take over?" So like having the credibility of kind of growing in your church, um,
Yes.
you have like so much people buy in. You've had the time to have these one-on-ones with volunteers and do the relationships they always say on the grounds, on the boots.
Yes.
Like that part is so crucial into running anything, right? The
Yes.
mission. And so they knew my character, they knew who I am. I've the time and the trust, even with leadership, right?
Yes.
It
Like
it
your senior leaders were like, okay, she wants to do this. Okay, her track record is great. Go therefore and do that.
Exactly. And so even like budget increases, all that, like you get buy-in and it takes
Yes,
years. It
it
takes
takes.
years to get that
It
kind of
does.
trust. Um, and so for me in that transition of even listening to God was painful because I
Wow.
didn't want to leave it. I
Okay.
This is what I knew, this is where I was comfortable. I like we put roots down. This was the house I was gonna live in forever,
Yeah,
like especially as a mom with 3 kids, I
that's
did
right.
not want change. I did not want the transition pain. Because a lot of ministry leaders actually can't bounce back sometimes from these transitions because it's so painful. They always say there's no hurt like church hurt
Oh,
because
preach
not only
that.
are you losing your job, you're losing your community, you're losing your friends, your ministry like partners that
Your children's friends.
oh, and then the kids that you love. Like
Yes,
they're growing up with you in ministry. Like the amount of kids that I grieve that I don't get to see, and the volunteers too, it's a process.
it is. And I think that people only see somebody moving from one church to another and like, oh, wow, neat upgrade. There's a lot that comes with that. There's a lot of the fine print that people don't understand.
Yeah.
And what you said is so true. You have buy-in from the senior leaders. They're willing, like at year one, when you were at that church and they made you the children's director, they already knew a little bit about you, but then they put you in that role. I always call this, and if people have done like the lead volunteers coaching with me, we talk about this at length. I call it storming, norming, and performing. So the first 18 months you're in the storm and you like it's cold and you can't see very well because of the clouds or the fog. You don't know what you're doing when you first start out. And
Yeah.
then you get to, 18 to 36 months, that period, and it's things are normal now. You've been around the block a few times. You've done Easter now 2 times at this church. You know how that goes. You've done fall kickoff. But then you get into the performing phase, which is, 36 months to forever.
Oh yeah.
And that's where you were, right?
And it beautiful. Like just because like especially leaders, they know your style, they
Yes,
understand the expectations around you. Um nothing's perfect, but
of course.
language, even systems, I would say. I didn't know that one would be so hard for me to adapt to. Like the systems are so different, even between two mega churches in the same state. Um,
Yes,
yeah.
because it's all homegrown. People don't realize that this particular church has this particular way of doing things, and it's fundamentally different. And by the way, when you're the new person, you can't just walk in and go, "Hey, let's flip this a different way." You don't have any of the credibility. You don't have any of the say or the buy-in. You're the new person, and you're starting back. You were at performing. You go all the way back to storming.
Thank you for giving me language for that, Josh. It did feel like a storming in my heart, I would
Yes,
say. Yeah, because you're grieving so much too, the
yes.
friends, like all my close friends are still up north. And so
Hmm.
trying to create that here. And then if you're a family, it's not just you, it's
That's
everyone
exactly
together.
right.
And I would say, in that sense, God has really been gracious in that my family
Right.
assimilated so well, like better than me, which was shocking because I'm the outgoing one. Um, but that part, I'm so gracious to God. I can't imagine because I know a couple friends
Hmm.
when it's not like that, when it is so difficult for the significant other and especially the kids. Like when it's
Yes.
so hard on the kids, it like wears on your soul.
Right. Because if your kids aren't doing well, that's a big piece to your own soul that is not doing well.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Because we
and
know like that's our primary ministry. And
that's right.
so you're like, oh, I'm in this new place and I'm having to have storms and then there's storms at home. Like that's just,
It's
oh,
hard.
so
It's hard. And when I transitioned out of a church, I remember my 12-year-old daughter at the time, she came into my office as it was all cleaned out and she just burst into tears. And she said, "I'm never going to be able to come back in here," because she loved coming to church and seeing me.
yeah.
And the everybody would be gone from the church. I'd come in to get something and they go, "Can we come to church?" And they would run through the halls in the dark. And it was like this big family thing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so, and I think the other thing too is that, tell me if this is what you experienced. You came onto a new staff and everybody is super excited. They're almost throwing like a party for the new person and everybody wants to greet you and meet you. That is unbelievably not a bad thing, but it's just draining because you don't know a single one of these people, but they all want to know you and greet you. And it's very, I mean, for you and I, we're the extroverts. We're the kind of 7 on the Enneagram. We're this go, 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 go. That still can be taxing on us.
It is. I mean, like I think, I mean, at Mariners, there's like, I don't know, however many thousands. And the number of kids here too has like uh, 5 times what I'm used to.
Yes.
So trying to get to know people and remember names because I care so much. It's
Yes.
like why we're in ministry.
Yeah.
Um, I care about each individual, but I genuinely can't remember everyone. And so then you have this guilt factor and shame, which is not what God wants. But
Sure.
that's it's hard. It really is. And then it's great when even people welcome you, but there are also the other half. Like, is she for real? Like,
Yes.
does she genuinely care? Or like what is she in then for? Like,
Yes.
right? So
So
there's that.
because they just don't know you. And so
No.
so I've oh my goodness, I've counseled and coached so many people who they are at the pinnacle of success at their current church and they are now wanting to go to another church. And I said, I just want to tell you, that's great. You have the capacity to move, but you're going to be losing so much. You're thinking that you're going to walk in as the same person. Now, you are the same person, but those around you, they do not know you.
Yeah.
They were adhered to the previous person.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's another thing too, is like every church, right? It is a living organism
It
full of
is.
humans, and every pain point, in some sense, gets absorbed to leadership.
It does.
It really, like, they identify it with whoever comes in that role sometimes. And so I would say first 3 months of my ministry here
Sure.
has been just trying to heal that. Like, whatever expectations, clarity that's needed, or
Hmm.
whatever needs to, and all the great things too, whatever celebrations
Of
of that
course.
past leader, all that just was no, that was probably first 3 months of my life. But I did cry at home every day because I
Oh,
was so
Catherine.
emotionally taxed. Because it's emotional, a lot
It
of
is
it.
emotionally taxing. And people are people are very invested. And
Yeah.
there's several reasons. One reason they're invested is this is the kingdom of God, and this is the most significant thing for so many people who are at your church. Now, put on top of that, this is their children. So
Oh
now
yeah.
it's even more significant to them. And so, and then of course, uh, uh, you have to manage those people who want you, that they'll come up to you. I mean, you probably didn't experience this, but for others who have, that somebody walks up and says, "Hi, my name is Bill, and I want to tell you God's will for your life at this church." And you're like, "Oh," you know. And again, just people who have expectations, and you have to figure out who are these people, because sometimes the sheep bite, right? You're
Yeah.
a shepherd, but sometimes the sheep bite.
Absolutely. And like, as a ridiculous people pleaser in me,
Yeah,
I want everyone to be happy. It's why I think I'm in kids ministry, because you just want
sure.
joy around all the time. But in a leadership role,
Hmm.
sometimes pleasing people is not necessarily what's good for them
That's
either.
right.
And like, that part, I would say fighting for clarity with God on my mission, on who I
Wow.
am,
Wow.
probably was the most intense 6 months of my life. On
Yes.
my knees every morning, crying out to Jesus, "You need to clarify your mission through me,
Yeah.
because it can't be about the people."
God
It is
bless you. That's a,
people, like, yeah,
okay. So that right there is that's your heart.
yeah,
That signifies that you are in a great place. Kind of like when Solomon back in the day, right? Solomon was, and God was like, "I'll give you whatever you want," and he said, "I want wisdom."
yeah,
Right? And he
yeah.
didn't want riches. He didn't want a long life. He didn't want to have conquer over his enemies. He wanted wisdom. So that's what you're asking for, right?
Amen. Amen. Yeah. Because I think at a certain point too, especially when you're starting over and you're in that storm, I know nobody wants to be in a painful place, but in that place, there's so much dependence on God.
There is.
And I want to stay
That's a great place to be.
yeah, I want to stay there. I think my favorite memory I always talk about is my missions experience in Africa. And
Hmm.
like, every minute was literally dependent on God, like to the place I'm gonna put my foot, to like where I'm gonna go to the restroom. My life is in his hands. And so it's so funny how in this transition, I told God, "I choose to follow you. I will do your will, but
Yeah.
oh man, you better tell me and make it clear."
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great thing. And Okay, here's a funny story that I want to relate to you. And this is affirming. This is affirming the idea that you are right where you need to be. Okay, and so here's the deal. Okay, so like small engine aircraft, like a Cessna, like an airplane, right? Like one or two people in the plane. Um, they have done studies where this particular subset of people who are flying those single engine aircraft, they have flown 0 to 500 hours, and this group has flown 500 or more hours. Now, which would you predict would have the greatest casualty or death rate? The 0 to 500 or the above 500?
Oh man, I mean, I know this is a trick answer, but normally I would suspect the non-experienced people.
But that's not what it was. I mean, you,
Yeah.
you know right where we're going, right? So the people who are 0 to 500 hours, they are freaked out about crashing.
They're like, alert, alert,
Alert! That's
follow the
exact
rules.
right. Follow the rules. Be super vigilant, and make sure I double check the gas fuel and double check the air pressure on these airplane tires, because that small mistake could cause a crash. And then the people who have been there 500 to infinity hours
Yeah,
of flying, they just kind of wing it,
yeah,
and they aren't hyper vigilant. Now, I certainly don't want to superimpose on somebody that they should have white knuckles, they should have stress, they should have freak out and anxiety belly. No. But the place that you're speaking about is that area of super vigilance and desperation on God.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It really is probably the biggest role I've ever had. I still can't believe God placed me here. Um, but it is, I've never depended on God more than I have now.
Yes.
So,
Well, the interesting thing, as I mentioned earlier, you were at the top of your game where you were. Everybody, and I don't mean this in a weird way, but people were literally willing to eat out of your hand. If you wanted to go in a direction, the whole crowd would go with you. If you had a vision from God and you felt that it was, your
yeah.
senior leaders would say, "Well, great, let's turn the ship that way. We believe in you." And
Oh,
that is going to literally take time
yeah.
to accomplish at this new church.
Yes. And I think that's the grace of God you have to constantly remind yourself. When you have that kind of success experience,
Yes.
you almost crave just that all the time.
Okay. Keep going with
And
that.
I'm
Please
learning,
go with that.
yeah, and I'm learning in some sense, I've put my identity in the successes I've I had, which is work, successful relationships, whatever that may be.
Yes.
And in this season, God really had to strip me and say, Catherine, regardless of your performance, regardless of all that, like, do you genuinely know that you are a child of God?
Hmm.
Like, do you know that? And that's the crazy part of even this transition. And there's no way I even thought that this was happening, where I have the opportunity to have a say in what like all of our congregations do in kids ministry, and being able to impact thousands of children every weekend. Like my heart is in awe of God. Um, but man, if you told me that this was gonna happen, I would be like, no, I'm
Yeah.
good.
Well, and so I'll say this as well. Those who are faithful in little will be faithful in much.
I will say that. I say that to my team who's starting off, who have the desire to want to do more constantly. I said, hey, like it's really important that you are successful and do not excellence just for excellence sake, but
Hmm.
do the work. And it's hard work, especially I think after COVID, like all of our working muscles a little bit went away.
They did, yes. And
But man,
but not only that, but I gained what I call the COVID-19 pounds.
okay. And so yeah, we need to work out too, but
Yo, yo, yo.
um
What I'm saying is that our leadership muscles had
yeah,
atrophied.
yes,
They'd
it really
atrophied.
has. It has. And so bringing that back and saying, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm 20 years into this ministry. I
Wow.
started as a consistent volunteer for 10 years before I did anything paid.
Yes.
I was an intern for 2 years. I was getting, paid 500 a month. I which was amazing at
Of
that
course.
time. Yeah, went from a church of 70 people to now, like, I don't even know, like 10, 15,000 just on
Yes.
this campus. Like, I just, I wish
But in between
I
that,
didn't get here, yeah, just by some
no,
magic.
it just all of a sudden you didn't walk into this. And
No.
so you went from the church of 70 to the church in Northern California, which was what, 1,000?
Yes, that church had 3,000
Okay,
pre-COVID. Yeah.
very good. So then you went from 70 to 3,000 and you were just an associate, and then you moved into the director role and
Yeah,
you had to earn your stripes as the director.
absolutely.
And so it
Absolutely.
doesn't happen overnight. And so then all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but I've kept a journal for the last 27 years. And
Oh,
I have them all down in a safe, a fireproof safe in my basement. Because it's like, you know, that like small group question where people are like, hey, if a house fire, what's the first thing you'd save? I would save all of my journals, right?
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so that's an important thing, I think, for all of us who are in leadership is to look back and to
Mm.
realize not only God's faithfulness, but his faithfulness through our hard work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know we talk about tithing in church and how God works in that kind of resources
Yes.
because it shows where your heart is. But same thing with the amount of time and effort that you give to God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I think God sees our heart. He sees our intentions. And not
Yes.
that you always have to work at a giant church to prove that He's been faithful.
No.
When you see your growth and dependability on God, like your faith walk in
Yes.
trust in Him, I think to me that's the most
That's a
amazing part.
big
Yeah.
rewarding thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, even yesterday I had heard some bad news and I was like, okay, all right, well, like my trust in God is there. Does it hurt?
But
Absolutely.
it's
But like
grown.
that foundational just trust
Okay.
is there.
Now
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Would you have been in a position to do what you're currently doing at the end of your time at the Church of 70? So in other
Like,
words,
yeah.
you're at your church of 70
Yeah.
and you were getting ready to go to the church of 3,000 as an associate. Could you have bypassed the last 5 years and walked directly into this job?
Oh, absolutely not. And just so you know, it was 700, which grew to 200. Then I transitioned to a church of 1,000, and then it was
Okay,
3,000. So
so
just
there's
like
this incremental thing. So
absolutely,
you even
absolutely.
left out some of the steps.
I did. And so if you tell me, especially in my position, is leading now staff, which is
Hmm.
very different sometimes with leading volunteers or leading kids, right? So my role has been in transition
Yes,
per se, leading staff and inspiring them now to do what you used to do at the church
100%.
of 70, it's a whole different skill.
And that's the thing. A lot of people mistakenly think, "Oh, I could grow this ministry if I just had a staff member." And here's what I say to them. You have no idea how to run a staff person and maximize them and get a ton out of their 40 to 45 hours a week. It is a skill and it is an art to
Yes.
to actually have staff. And I'll tell you, it actually, people think that it's going to make their life easier. It actually makes your life significantly more complicated. Now watch this. You can get way more done and you can achieve way more, but it is a level of a mantle of leadership that is far heavier than if you're by yourself.
Because it's precious souls and the
Yes.
passion that you have for kids ministry, you want that to continuously um like
Hmm.
live on and inspire people, but we're all fallen. We're
You
so
betcha.
fallen. And so like one thing is people always, get upset at senior pastor or executive leadership. I'm like, no one's perfect. But when
Exactly.
you've had experience of leading staff and other leaders, you understand the little bit of pressure. Can you imagine
I
the
cannot.
giant pressures, right?
That's right.
Like, oh, so I mean, I'm always an advocate for like praying for your leaders. And yes, if it's not a good fit, like leave graciously, leave
Yes.
kindly, leave knowing that you know what, there's probably mistakes in both ends and goodness in both
That's
both
right. That's
places.
right.
Yeah.
And assume as best you can,
Yeah.
assume positive motives, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Bob Goff is somebody that we've listened to and have been a fan of. And one of the things that he has said that stuck with my wife and I is what's the least creepy reason that somebody would make that decision? Right? What's the least creepy reason? In other
Yeah.
words, it's like giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so let me come up with the least creepy reason why they would do that. But I'm super excited for you. I really, really, really am. It's been fun to watch this journey. And when I found out that you're going to Mariners, I was like, there you go. And and that's exciting. It's fun. It's been fun to be your friend and watch these great things. Those who are faithful in little will be faithful in much. And by the way, for somebody out there who is in a small country church of 180 people, the goal isn't to get to a church of 15,000. The goal is for you to be faithful with that which you've been entrusted with. The end.
Absolutely. And I've used your stuff in the church of 70 to like even now. So just know, Josh, you're like you really have helped ministries. And so I
Aw,
just want to thank you. I love your lead volunteer stuff. It's so good. It
thank
always
you.
inspires me. And I would say, yeah, totally agree with you. Being faithful to where God placed you and see
That's
his
right.
timing in that. Yeah.
And I remember early on that I was over my head and at a large church, and I had never done any ministry before. I went from being a chemistry teacher to a church of, multiple thousand, and I was like, "Okay, let's learn, let's learn to swim here.
Yeah.
But what I decided is just be faithful with whatever is directly in front of you. You can't solve everything. Be as absolutely as faithful as you can with this right here, and then God multiply it and help me.
Yep. Seriously. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially in the transition when you're starting over.
Yes. And so I just want to speak truth into your life as if we weren't recording this, as if this wasn't going to be on a podcast. I just want to say to you that, like, you're fine. You're doing okay. You have been in, you're still in the storm. And
Yeah.
a lot of leaders have said to me, "Hey, so can I shortcut the storm? Is there any way that I can, like, just like cut through the meadow and be done with the storm?" And there isn't. It's time. It's it's time. It's a solid 18 months.
Yeah.
And I remember one leader just like their whole body composure sunk and they were like, "What?" But it comes to an end.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the crazy I don't and it's less stormy 6 months in than it was at 3 months, am I right?
Oh, 1,000,000%. Yeah. I
Yes.
remember I walked on this weekend and I was like, oh, it feels so great.
Yes. And so you're starting to transition into that norming
Yep.
phase. And
Hmm.
part of the norming phase, and of course part of the storming phase, why it's stormy, is that people literally don't know you yet. So,
And I don't know them. And
yes,
that's a huge part too. Like everyone's heart, their capacities, their skill sets.
what they
How does
did
it
before.
vision? Hmm.
Now this is a random question. Did you find, because I've found this with so many leaders and in my own experience, did you find anybody who was that they felt that their time was done serving as a key volunteer when you came on? In other words, they were holding it all together and they were a key leader, and it would have been great for them to stay, but as soon as the new person came, they jettisoned. Did that happen with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can see it in our like volunteer, like a huge dip when Catherine came.
And
Um,
that's a good case of the normals.
yeah.
That's not because, listen, they don't have anything to even base. This is not about you. This is about, they see this is a natural part of of church organizational leadership. They see a new person like, "Hey, you know what? I think my time is done." And then in a sense that's so painful, but if they were to stay, you wouldn't be able to create the culture that's Catherine's culture.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so amazing because in that sense I see the opportunity of God saying, "Hey, when you start new things, or hopefully
Mhm.
you are this dependent for a very long time, um, it really makes you creative." And it helped me to reorg some people. It helped
Yes.
me to really evaluate our values and what we want to
Mhm.
do for especially Mariners kids specifically. But the cool thing too is like 6 months into it, a lot of those people, they're such great people, right?
Yes.
Like they held it for a reason because
They
they
held
loved
it.
the ministry,
Yes.
but they came back. A
Did
lot
they
of them,
really?
came back because they just needed some rest. And I think
Yes.
as leaders, especially when we work with volunteers, we get upset. Oh, people aren't here. And oh, it's so frustrating, the call outs, all that stuff. But man, if someone's saying I need rest and they get it, it's so good for the actual whole
It is.
organization. Um,
And so
and it
don't burn bridges. Don't burn bridges with people
my
when they quit. All of a sudden, if somebody has been holding this thing together, you get there, they take a hike, don't all of a sudden be embittered toward that person. Like, what's the least creepy reason? The least creepy
yeah,
reason is that they're exhausted. Give them a break, man.
yeah, because they were basically doing your job.
That's
So
exactly right.
yeah, I
Well,
mean, I'm so grateful. Yeah, a lot of our people have taken that break 6 months, and we're starting to see some of them coming back.
and so
Um,
them coming back means that they're watching you from afar and they feel that it's okay to join your train in your ship.
yeah, I'm praise God. Seriously, I'm so grateful. And so grateful for their heart. I think at a church like Mariners, where we have such amazing history of incredible kids ministry,
Very
they
much so.
really, yeah, they really care about what's happening in that building. They care about child discipleship. Any volunteers who are serving in your ministry, they're not giving you an hour and a half because like someone's putting a knife at their like
No, no, they could do anything
genuinely
they wanted to do.
like any volunteer, they genuinely care about following God's will and his
Yes,
people. Like
yes.
to me, they are such precious diamonds. Like really.
And
And
if
so
you have that heart, if you have that heart, those diamonds are willing that they are willing to be found in the rough.
yeah.
Oh, Catherine, you're the best. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. Um,
Thank you.
and I want to ask one final question. How are you having fun?
Yeah.
What's fun for you right now? Because you and I, we kind of thrive on fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think the first few weeks it was so serious because it's of course summertime. And I was like, oh, I miss fun. I will say this is so, I don't know, ugly part, but I love talking about myself. So it's really fun.
Okay,
This
I get
season.
what you're saying. So because a lot of people want to find out about you, and so it's been a nice refreshment for you to have opportunities to share your heart, share your vision, share your story, and share with people that you were a K-pop star.
Wanna be K-pop star. Wanna be K-pop star.
No, you
Um,
were a K-pop star, weren't you?
no, like barely was about to be, but yeah,
So
I
for
didn't.
everybody who doesn't know that, I know we're over time. It doesn't matter, but I mean everybody wants to know this. They want the skinny on this thing. So what is a K-pop star?
It's a Korean pop star. They're very famous. I feel like I don't have to explain it anymore. Like BTS, Blackpink, all these big groups have now
Yes, they've kind of popped out. They're doing their
they
thing.
they're doing their thing. I don't need it's so awesome how I don't need to explain what K-pop is. It is Korean pop. It was one of my dreams. I pursued it probably for about like a good 5 years. Got to train at the top organizations.
But
It
you
was
were
really
like you were on the track.
I was on the track.
Oh
Yeah, I was.
my word.
And then God's like, no, let me tell you what you're actually gonna do. And then
Okay, so but how fun though that like God doesn't waste anything, and I would just imagine that those K-pop experiences have influenced positively how you live your life. That's the way God works.
it is absolutely in terms of production levels, like in terms of
Yeah.
what I know kids can do too.
And how kids can dance and how kids
Yeah,
can be a part of a worship team and actually pull stuff off. I was wondering if that was if that influenced you.
absolutely. I mean, who from wanting to be a K-pop star to doing kids ministry, and my first internship position was kids worship leader. So
Uh,
like
perfect.
definitely. Yeah, it totally influences. But another fun thing too is like seeing fellow kids ministry people getting really passionate. I think that's been
Yeah.
really fun to watch, seeing their creativity rising up, seeing their leadership capacities growing. That part has been and that's probably what I enjoyed most at
Hmm.
my last positions too towards the end is being able to influence other leaders.
For sure.
um, I didn't know how fun that was.
Okay.
So,
That
yeah.
welcome to my life. Welcome to how much fun my life is because when I get okay, remember that old cartoon Go Go Gadget Arms? Remember Go Go?
Yes.
He had the really long arms, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so as a staff member who oversaw 7 full-time staff people. I was living with go-go gadget arms, and I was operating and helping them do ministry, but I wasn't directly doing it. It was so fulfilling to see somebody else live up and live into their full calling and their full potential, and to see them get to places that they never thought that they could get. But I
Oh,
saw it from a distance, and I was like, I knew that this was you and you're capable. So
yeah.
with
That's
the
so amazing.
so
That's
in
what
a
I'm
sense,
for.
that's all I do now, right?
That's why you're so happy. No, it really is. It's amazing. And I will, yeah, I will say that part really has been so much fun watching them, seeing them grow. And I will say it comes in both ways. It's super fun, but it's also painful because for leaders, many times you have to let go what you love.
Exactly. Now, Catherine, what you just said, that is the essence of being a leader. Now, I'm going to
Yep.
share, this is the truth. You had said earlier, it sounds kind of wacky, but you like to talk about yourself. Well, I'm a very gifted upfront communicator, and
Yes, you
I can be on a stage, and I can handle myself quite well. And at the church of 2,500 or whatever we were at that time, there was no question that I was the single best communicator when it came to kids. No question.
Yeah.
Hands down. I mean, good gracious, I travel all over the country and do it all over the place. Fine. But I rarely ever taught. And somebody would
Yep.
be like, man, what a waste. Why wouldn't you be teaching? I said, no, 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 no. My highest use, though I love teaching, my highest and best use was to pour into other people and get them to teach at higher and higher and higher levels.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, I took that lesson from you and I practiced it, and taking that back seat and
Yes.
encouraging people who don't think they can do it. And
Yes.
that's what I
And
I always encourage my staff. Like, you have to, there are parts where you let go things you don't want to do because you're not gifted. Like,
of
that's a
course,
whole different
that's a
thing.
whole different story. And by the way, I'm willing to get rid of those in like half a second. Okay.
But in the hard things that where
Yes.
you feel inspired, that you really have to give away.
You do. And I know there's a lot of leaders who are like, nope, I want to be the sage on the stage. And that's fine. Maybe you're going to exist at that level and that's fine. But I feel okay, last I looked, Catherine, the human condition has the mortality rate hovering right around 100%. You know, we're not going to be in this for all of our lives.
Yeah.
Paul didn't stay as the super apostle of Philippi. He didn't stay as the everything pastor of Ephesus.
Even though we want
He
him to be here right now.
Right? Yeah. But my point is that he started something and then he moved on to start something else. And so we don't have to have our hands on it.
Yeah.
And here's a closing thought. And I've had several closing thoughts, but I'm having too much fun. You're cool. So here's an interesting one. I remember that somebody gave me the ball and put me in the game long before I really probably deserved to be in the game.
Yeah. Yep.
And somebody gave you the ball, Catherine, and I could almost get emotional thinking about this. Somebody gave you the ball when you were at a church of 70, and
Yep.
you probably weren't all that qualified, no different than I wasn't qualified. They gave you the ball, they put you in the game. So my charge to every leader out there, get over yourself and put somebody in the game.
Amen. Amen. It's hard. It's painful because you're like, it's my baby. I love it. No, but when you do, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But man, when it does work, it really is so fun.
It is so fun to see somebody else thrive.
Yeah.
Catherine, you're the best. I want to have you back, man. Can we do this again sometime?
Anytime,
All
especially
right.
with you. Seriously.
Okay.
And your whole family. Oh my gosh.
Well, God bless you. This has been super, super fun. I wish you the best. I know you're doing great. Reach out anytime, whether it's even not on the podcast. I would love to connect. Okay, gang. This has been the Lead Volunteers Podcast. Very, very grateful that you've tuned in today. What a special conversation. There are so many great things to take away from this. Well, gang, we're grateful for you. We will catch you on the next one.